Hajime Mashite noobs, and for everybody else, you know how we do. Roll the tape.
This right here is a tesseract, which is a four-dimensional cube, except this is actually not a tesseract, but instead a representation of a tesseract in three-dimensional space. And it looks a little bit confusing, but by the end of this video, I promise you'll understand what this shape is, how 4D space and 4D objects work, how 4D space impacts you all of the time, and why you should care. We often think topics like this aren't really relevant to our day-to-day life, but learning about this subject specifically can change your opinion on your life, the universe, and maybe even your spirituality. So even if you aren't a mathematically minded person, you should still definitely be able to get something out of this, and there won't be any math in this video, just explanations. So because I'm trying to explain a subject that's really complicated in a way that the average person will understand, I'm going to be making a lot of simplifications and making some compromises in this video. So if this topic interests you, then you should definitely do some research on it because it's super interesting. And in this video, I'm really only going to be giving you a baseline of how 4D space works. And this is one of those topics that you kind of have to keep coming back to over time. So it's okay if things don't make sense on the first watch. You should still be able to get something out of this video by the end of it. So first of all, what actually is 4D space? So the first thing to understand about 4D space and 4D objects is that it is literally impossible to comprehend with the human brain.
Unless you're a fucking genius like me. I'm mostly joking. Some people have called me a genius, but I don't really know. There's levels to this shit, you know. There's fucking autists or savants who are like even got more wrinkles in their brain than I do, and I'm just swimming out there with the fucking sharks in the ocean trying to fucking be cool or whatever. But before we keep going into the super deep depths of fourth-dimensional space with this dude, Vetoo, I think is what his channel is called. The book that had originally introduced me to this concept was like, I read it all the way back in like the sixth, 7th, or 8th grade, somewhere in that weird middle school phase, preteen phase of our lives, my life. But it was A Wrinkle in Time by Madeline L. Engel, published in 1962. It was just such a mindfuck of a book, and like they used it to like teleport or get through a wormhole, because in the way she had explained it, that it was like it folds space so that you could, instead of having to go through the straight line, you could just fucking fold it in a little loop and then step across. And there was like this brain that like was mind controlling everybody, a giant brain in a vat, or just a giant brain that was fucking with people's minds. And it's a crazy book. I probably should reread it, honestly, but let's continue.
And the reason for this is because we live in a three-dimensional universe, so we're bound to these three dimensions. And I'll talk a little bit more later about specifically why that is, but for now, all you need to know is you can't actually truly see a 4D object. However, you can understand how 4D objects in 4D space behave, and the best way to do that is by looking at lower dimensions. So, first of all, what exactly is the definition of a dimension? So a dimension is just a measurable extent of some kind, so like width, length, and depth are the three that we use to describe a three-dimensional universe, but for our purposes, you can just think about a dimension as an infinite line that a point or a particle can travel across. Because this particle can travel in two directions, each dimension will have two directions associated with it, and we use numbers to measure that particle's movement. So a positive number would mean that particle's moving forward, and a negative number means it's moving backwards. So personally, I think the best way to really like internalize this understanding is to look at graphs. And you've likely used graphs before to obviously graph things or to solve problems in school. And graphs are an example of a two-dimensional space, meaning that we only need two numbers to measure where any particle or point is in that space. We have the y dimension, which is up and down, and we have the x dimension, which is side to side. So for the y, a positive number is up, a negative number is down, and for the x, a positive number is forward and a negative number is backwards. So like I said, you only need two numbers to fully describe any particle's movement in a two-dimensional universe. And of course, if you removed one of those dimensions, you would only need one number. So what happens if you add a dimension? Well, you could probably guess that you would make a three-dimensional graph. So now you need three numbers to fully describe a particle's movement in that space. So one thing that's really important to note here that can kind of get lost a little bit is that when we're adding a dimension, we're literally adding a direction to the space. Now, of course, because we're 3D beings, when we think about like a 2D graph, we think about a 2D graph in a 3D space. But if you lived on that 2D graph, then you would only have those 2 dimensions, and one of those sides would be infinitely thin. But as a 2-dimensional being, you would not know that. You wouldn't be able to recognize that. So when we add dimensions, it's almost like we're adding another side to reality, which isn't like technically a mathematically true statement, but it gets the point across. So logically, in order to make a 4-dimensional space, you would just have to add another dimension to a 3-dimensional space. So now you would need 4 numbers to describe a particle's point in that universe. So now we have width, length, depth, and breadth, which is the 4th term that we need to describe that new 4th dimension that we just added. So that's how you construct a 4D space, but 4D shapes are a little bit more complicated. So let's construct a tesseract fully from scratch, starting at 1 dimension. So there's only a few shapes that are actually possible in 1 dimension, those being a line, a ray, a line segment, but for now we only need to worry about the line segment. So like a square and a cube, a tesseract, or a hypercube, is also composed of equal length line segments. So we only need to worry about the line segment here in 1-dimensional space. So if we want to make a square from this line segment, what we can do is take this line segment in the 1-dimensional space and basically stretch it along a new dimension. And if we stretch it the right distance, then we get a square. So now if we want to make a cube from this square, all we have to do is repeat the same process. We just take that square and we just stretch it out along a new dimension and we get a cube. So naturally, to make a tesseract, we do exactly the same thing. We take this cube and we stretch it along a new dimension. Obviously, this is where things get a little bit tricky because as 3-dimensional beings, we don't have another dimension to use here. So what we have to do is we have to compensate and basically pretend that a direction in 3-dimensional space is actually a new direction. So to do that, we add a dimension that has the directions inner and outer. But it's very, very important to note here that this is not where the direction would be. You would have to literally, like I said, add another side to reality to do this. And as 3-dimensional beings, we just can't do it. Our brains just have only ever experienced 3-dimensional space. But anyway, using this compromise, we can take the cube and we can stretch it along either one of these dimensions. And as you can see, we just made a tesseract. So that's basically how 4-dimensional space and 4-dimensional objects are constructed. It's actually pretty simple.
So he says, left brain motherfucker, dude. I don't know, man. It's like, isn't time a dimension? We can't time travel, allegedly. Only the fucking people in the secret fucking space program or fucking black budget programs like Project Looking Glass, like have the capability of like using technology to manipulate or gaze into the future. And it's, man, dude, it's kind of frustrating and weird, right? Like I'm not really 1000% sure myself. Like I'd like to know about both the conspiratorial things and this whole tesseract business, because yeah, the whole inner and outer is confined within the 3rd dimension of like you can go inside the cube and the space outside of the cube is defined by the thing. And I guess realistically the actual like threshold or like capacity for comprehension is still the limitation of the biological jello we call a brain. Because for me, the soul is the infinite and is the thing experiencing the world, and that the brain is just the filter through which we're able to control our body and interact with the electromagnetic dimension of time-space continuum. But that the soul is the thing that's able to like theorize or quantify or try to get into the higher dimensions, because it is actually higher dimensional in its nature. We are multidimensional beings. We are humans. We're souls having a human experience and a human with a soul. But I don't know if that's even going to be remotely anywhere near what this guy's talking about, because he has to take it from the left brain math perspective, because that's just how a lot of people kind of perceive reality to be. It's just very logical and orderly, and that there isn't this like weird, infinitely spiraling, flowy, feminine fucking side of to chaos. I mean, obviously they can acknowledge that entropy is chaos or whatever, but to surrendering to a divine feminine is kind of like not really something the left brain people like to do or acknowledge. But let's keep trying to understand some fucking shit here. Let's keep just trying to understand.
It's just a weird concept to grasp because you literally can't visualize that fourth dimension. But don't worry, in this video, I'm gonna give you a lot of different ways to kind of understand what that fourth dimension would look like, or not what it would look like, but how it behaves. Now, one thing to note here is if we were four-dimensional beings living in a four-dimensional universe, it would make perfect sense to us. In the same way that we have depth cues to tell how far away something is, there would be cues to give us information about that fourth dimension of space. But again, we just have never experienced those and they don't exist in our universe. So we just aren't able to visualize them, unfortunately. So a really useful way to understand this is with this game called 4D Toys on Steam. And this is a game that basically just renders 4D objects. Interestingly, computers have no problem computing 4D space and 4D objects. In 3D simulations, a computer just calculates an object's position with, of course, those three numbers that we mentioned earlier, X, Y, and Z. And all we need to do to calculate the position of a 4D object is to just add one more number. So even though computers can calculate these objects and their positions, they still can't fully render them. And the reason for this is because computers output 2D images, so they technically can't even display 3D objects in their true form. Computers basically just visualize a shadow of a 3D shape cast onto a 2D surface. The only reason we can understand these 2D projections as 3D objects is because we understand the concept of depth cues, which basically tell us how far away or how close something is to us based on the size of the object. And using this, we can also kind of gauge how far away objects might be from us. Now, if you lived in a four-dimensional universe, that universe would have similar depth cues to be able to give you information about an object's position along that fourth dimension. But since we're three-dimensional beings and we live in a three-dimensional universe, not only can we not understand or comprehend these cues, but they literally don't exist in our universe. And that's the reason why computers can't simulate them. It's sort of the same concept as trying to imagine a new color. There are other colors that exist, but in order to be able to see them, you would need to have eyes that could detect the light, and then you would need to have a brain that could actually process that information. So because we can't make an accurate shadow of a 4D object in 3D space, we instead have to once again compromise. And so what we do is we instead take a three-dimensional cross-section of that four-dimensional object, and that we are able to simulate. The only problem with this is it looks very, very confusing. Now, if you were a fourth-dimensional being and you had a computer that could render 3D space, that space would not look like these cross-sections of three-dimensional objects. Instead, like how our computers simulate a two-dimensional shadow of a three-dimensional object, their computers would simulate a three-dimensional shadow of a four-dimensional object. And this is because a fourth-dimensional being could actually see all three sides of a three-dimensional object in the same way that we can see the entirety of a two-dimensional object, but a two-dimensional being wouldn't be able to see the entirety of that. So this right here is a representation of a two-dimensional universe. And this little stick guy right here is a two-dimensional being. Now to him, this object that we can clearly see is a circle would just look like a line because he can only see this one dimension of it. But because we're three-dimensional beings, we can see that this is actually not a one-dimensional line, but a two-dimensional circle. So it would be a similar concept for a four-dimensional being. So this stick figure is stuck in a two-dimensional universe, but this two-dimensional universe is actually contained inside of a three-dimensional universe. And as we can see here, in this three-dimensional universe, there is a sphere. Now, because the sphere isn't interacting with that two-dimensional universe, to the stick figure, there is no sphere. However, if we take this two-dimensional universe and we move it so that it interacts with the sphere, we can see, seemingly out of nowhere, a circle has just appeared. And as we take that circle and move it closer to the middle of this sphere, you can see to the stick figure, the sphere gets bigger as it reaches the middle, and then it gets smaller as the two-dimensional universe passes through the sphere until it eventually pops out of existence. Now, of course, to us, we can see that this makes perfect sense. The shape isn't actually changing and morphing, it's just that the cross-section of the sphere that the stick figure can see is being passed through the sphere. So let's take this concept and move it up a dimension. So here we're in a three-dimensional universe. So now what we're going to do is take a 4D hypersphere and pass it through this three-dimensional universe. And as we can see, when we do that, we see a sphere that pops into existence, gets bigger as it gets closer to the middle of the hypersphere, smaller as it gets closer to the end, and then pops out of existence again. So going back to our 2D universe contained inside the 3D universe, we can see here that we have a rotating cube. So now if we take the 2D universe and move it through this rotating cube, we can see to the stick figure, it looks like this cube appears to morph and transform and just do all sorts of weird things. It like gains more sides and then loses them. All of the angles are changing, but the shape isn't actually changing shape. We can very clearly see here that just the cross section of the shape is being rapidly changed as the object is being rotated. So going back to 3D space, in this 3D space, even though you can't see it, there is a rotating 4D tesseract. And as we move the 3D universe through that tesseract, we can see that it once again appears to change shape and gain sides and do all of that weird stuff, but now in 3 dimensions. So the shapeshifting of this object is not caused by the object actually changing in any form, it's just simply caused by the object moving and rotating through the 3 spatial dimensions we're used to and the 4th dimension as well. So using this principle of taking a 3D cross-section of a 4D object, we can actually make 4D games. And people have done it.
Bro, I hope you are not on a psychedelic or any type of mind-altering substance while watching this fucking video, dude. Holy shit, that is so cool. Like, oh my god, bro. The whole fucking, like... I wonder if that's what happens when, like, planes and shit disappear to the Bermuda Triangle, or if that's just a psyop. Like, any of the things where, like, a bunch of weird shit is happening, if there's like some other dimension or beam of energy that's like messing with reality, so like shit it's just disappearing into a whole ass other like place, wormhole, tesseract thing. But that's really the only thought I could even add, because it's just this is so fucking crazy, bro. I just really love the whole fucking like sphere fucking moving through, and all it just looks like the circle getting bigger and smaller. Like that shit was fucking dope as fuck, bro. Like creepy, but like it's like I'm learning but afraid of the unknown kind of way. Like, well, fucking it's crazy.
Many 4D games out there, and even games that go in much higher dimensions. And one game that I think does a pretty good job of making this a little bit more intuitive is 4D Miner. So obviously you can already tell at first glance this game looks really weird and confusing, but it actually has a built-in way of kind of understanding the game. So as you can see here, we have a little frog, his name is Frank, and he is a 2-dimensional being. So Frank is bound to 2 dimensions, and he can only move forward, backward, up, and down. But as we can see, his world is much more complex because it has that 3rd dimension, which allows for objects to be in front and behind. So Frank can't fully experience this full 3D world, but what we can do is make a little bit of a compromise. And by using the scroll wheel, we can actually rotate the cross section of the 3D world that he experiences. And in doing that, we can get Frank anywhere we want on this 3-dimensional world, but he's still only experiencing and bound to 2 dimensions. So for example, if we want to put Frank in this cave here, we can just rotate the cross section so that it lines up with the cave, and then Frank can just go jump in. And he's a little bit stuck now, so if we want to get him out, we can just rotate it a little bit more, and now he has a way out. So at first glance, you can see this looks pretty much just like normal Minecraft, besides some of the weirdly shaped blocks and the floating trees. But by using my scroll wheel to rotate the 3D cross-section of the 4D world we're experiencing, we can see that there's actually a lot more to this world than meets the eye. As you can see, the biomes change and mountains appear and disappear. It looks very confusing, but the point here is that this is a 3-dimensional cross-section of that 4-dimensional world.
I am telling you, that is like what DMT is like. I don't know if you've never done it before. That's like the feeling of like sickness and upsetting as he was scrolling in the different material from the other sides of the tesseract, phasing into reality, in and out. Like, that is exactly what DMT is like. Like, it is just very upsetting to your physical body, but your mind is kind of just like, yo, that's really fucking cool. But like the physical body being stuck or bound to 3D reality that was disgustingly upsetting to me. To my body, I guess, not to my mind or my soul, but
that last part might have been like really confusing, and if you're confused by that, don't worry, it's super confusing, and it's not important you understand exactly how this works right now. You just need a general concept of how this kind of functions. Okay, so now that that's all out of the way, how is this relevant to your everyday life? Well, in our universe, if you want to describe where an object's position is, you not only need its 3 spatial dimensions, but there's one more dimension that you need: when it occurs. So technically, our universe is comprised of 4 dimensions, 3 spatial dimensions, and 1 dimension of time. Now, it is widely accepted to consider time as the fourth dimension because it does fit the definition of being a dimension, that being it's a measurable extent of some kind. But it's important to note that it is fundamentally different from the three spatial dimensions of our universe, because we can only experience time in one direction. But as 3D beings, it is impossible for us to fully comprehend the dimension of time. It would be like experiencing two events at exactly the same time. It's not even something that we can comprehend.
That's kind of because time is sort of a trap, like how he's saying you can't like ever go backwards in time with a body corporeally to our current level of technology that we're aware of. And then this whole random side thing that like if you were able to open up a portal through time, it would only be able to ever go back. Whoever had access to it could only ever go back to that moment that it opened the portal, because there just wasn't a way to get any farther back in time than the first time you started the fucking it's not like whatever cascade, but I'm thinking of the Rick and Morty episode, but that's more of like the squids instead of the other fucking what is it even called, like recursive loop of snakes eating their own tail. I have it tattooed, the Ouroboros, on my arm, but it's less so than that. But I can't remember the whatever kind of cascade it was, because they love to blend philosophical things into Rick and Morty and make it as ridiculous as humanly possible. But ultimately, that time is an illusion, because the present moment is the actual only thing that ever exists in all of our ability to plan into the future and project our minds and longings and desires there, like, is an illusion. But philosophically, like, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. But if you know where you're going, every road will take you there. Every road will take you there. It's kind of like this catch-22 that, like, it doesn't exist, but we are creating it in the present moment forever. Essentially, like, as soon as you have the desire and you are in alignment with it, that the thing that you want into the future is actually also simultaneously immediately happening. It's just, it takes, from our perspective of the now evolving and slowly changing over quote unquote time, that future now and the present now are the same now, and we just don't experience it that way, because it would be way less fun for our biology, essentially, or that, like, however God, source, Zymo fucking set it up that way for us to be able to experience cause and effect, because a lot of people are kind of like ignorant to it, or choose to be ignorant to it, willfully ignorant of the fact that what they're choosing to do is causing the future to be worse than the present. But let's just keep going.
And interestingly, two of our most successful theories of the universe, the Standard Model, which is an equation that basically aims to define and describe all fundamental particles in the universe, and the theory of relativity, which deals with space-time, are fundamentally incompatible. We don't really understand how particles and quantum fluctuations and space and time all merge together. Right now, this is the holy grail of physics, is finding a way to unify these theories. So general relativity and special relativity are two of Einstein's most famous models. General relativity attempts to explain gravity and motion, which it does very accurately, and special relativity aims to describe energy, space, and time, which is also highly accurate in what it attempts to describe. These theories together form the full theory of relativity, which very much points to space-time being sort of like a 4D object that exists all at once. These two theories together make up the theory of relativity, which very much points towards space and time being a unified 4D object. So according to our best theories, the universe is composed in a way that is at least one dimension higher than we typically think. In order to fully see that extra dimension, that being time, you would either need to be a theoretical 4D being that could see all of time at once, or you would need to be a 3D being that experienced all of time from beginning to end, in the same way that Frank would have to experience every 2D cross-section of his 3D world in order to fully understand it. But he still could never truly see the full 3D world, in the same way that we can only see a cross-section of the 4-dimensional object of space-time that we are experiencing. So the last piece of the puzzle here is described by the theory of relativity, time is relative, which basically means the faster you go, the slower you experience time. But in the universe, the speed at which you can go seems to be capped. It's the speed of light. At least as we understand it, nothing can go faster than the speed of light. And the reason for this is because light is made up of photons, which are massless particles, and that's why they can travel at an uncapped speed. So,
except for information, because consciousness is that weird medium that is the fourth dimensional object through which time is permanently forever the present moment, insofar or because, like, shit, I was hoping I don't lose this train of thought, that deducing or the measurement of a quantum particle, you immediately know the other particles spin. Like if one's spinning up and the other one's spinning down and it's farther than the speed of light away from you, it creates that particle spin, or like the measurement of it causes the potentiality of infiniteness to collapse into one specific occurrence. And that shouldn't be possible. The information shouldn't be able to travel faster than the speed of light to wherever that other quantum particle is on the other side of the fucking universe. But it does, because consciousness is the bridge layer of the... I imagine it, the way that I understand it, as sort of like lava in a lava lamp mixed with the sand in an hourglass, or that it's like a very weird like jello that is infinitely flowing everywhere in and out of our bodies. Our bodies are made of it. The water bottles are made of it. Like the microphone is made of it. Like everything is consciousness and it has a level of awareness, is conscious on some level. Physical matter, it seemingly is inert because it doesn't have the complex human feelings or emotions or things, but it's still aware because it's still consciousness and is still able to be interacted with a being that has a physical body and is able to operate it and understand it and comprehend it and name it, and all these aspects of human consciousness. Because aliens are a thing, definitely. Like you can just look up the treasure trove of shit that the government is releasing over the past like decade, that they did the entire 180 of, from UFOs don't exist, you're crazy, and ruin your life and maybe kill you for speaking out about it, to now they are a thing and we're going to use it to try to usher in a World War III or a fucking new world government or one world government, because we need to fight the aliens. Watch out, they're really evil and bad, but it's really just us pulling the strings with our drones or whatever the fuck. But you know, I gotta put my tinfoil hat on sometimes, because like truth is stranger than fiction, and consciousness is the all-encompassing, all-encapsulating medium through which we experience ourselves subjectively until we go back into the higher dimensions to become unified again with this creator that created itself infinitely and is infinitely creating infinitely. It's too much. It's too much. If this video wasn't enough of a trip, me fucking talking about this video is even more of a trip. So here we are.
How do photons experience time? Well, they don't. At those speeds, the effects of time dilation become infinite. And so to a photon, from the moment the beginning of the universe happened to now, that photon has experienced no time. So this means, or at least appears to mean, that our experience of time is an experience created by our minds. Time does exist, but our experience of it isn't a fully encompassing view of it. Just because we observe it this way, it doesn't necessarily mean that it objectively exists in this way. So this concept is a frontier of modern science, and there's many ways to explain it, but one of the ideas is the block universe theory, which basically describes all of time and all of our three dimensions as one continuous 4D object. Going back to that proton that doesn't experience time, it actually does experience time all at once. And so because of this, modern physics basically suggests that all moments in time are equally real and exist in a higher fourth dimension. Basically, our universe, all of space and all of time, would exist as one full object, and the present moment is a cross-section of that entire object. So the present moment that you're experiencing right now is, at least according to modern theories, a 3D cross-section of an entire 4D shape. Whenever you hear the term space-time, that is what it's referring to. One continuous fabric of 3 spatial dimensions and 1 dimension of time. Or at least that's what the best and most accurate mathematical theories we have today describe. This is why people make such a big fuss about Albert Einstein. He proposed this idea and then proved with mathematics that it was a very accurate way of describing our universe. And to this day, it's still the best description that we have. So, what does all of this mean? Well, what it means is that every single decision you've ever made, everything you've ever been, everything that you are, and everything that you ever will be exists all at the same time on a higher dimension. And that your life is being constructed in a higher dimensional way that we don't fully understand. Have you ever felt like something in your life happened for a reason? Or maybe ever heard that one day you'll look back and realize that you were exactly where you needed to be, doing exactly what you needed to do, even if it didn't feel like it? Well, this could be why. Space-time just isn't as simple as one thing happens, then the next, and then the next. Our lives are constructed in ways that we can't fully understand as human beings. So that could mean that your life and our world is so much more intricate and beautiful and complex than we can even comprehend with our brains. And modern day physics says it's not only possible, but probable. So take this information with a grain of salt. I want you to come to your own conclusions about the universe. But just keep this in the back of your mind and really consider one thing. Is the universe giving you what you need? Now, you might immediately say, no, of course not. I mean, if it did, I would be living on a beach in a mansion somewhere doing my hobbies all day. And, that's fair. But is that really what you need, or is that just what you want? Because to a human being, those things sound really good. To the universe, there's no good and there's no bad. There just are things that exist. Because of this, even horrible things can happen for a reason, even if it's for a reason that we as human beings will never be able to understand. So try to listen to what it might be telling you. I know personally that in my life, things guide you. When you make a mistake, you have consequences, and that pushes you in the other direction. When you do things good, it feels good and you want to stay there, and that keeps you there. It's like this restoring an equilibrium force. And interestingly, just through modern physics, we've come to a place of spirituality. The universe showing and teaching you things is very much a concept of religion. And I'm not a religious person, but I do believe that the universe, it does show you things, and it does show you sort of the correct way. Not technically the correct way, because again, to the universe, there is no correct, there's no wrong, there's no good, there's no bad. But there is certain paths that for us and the universe that we live in, with the specific laws that it has, there are certain ideas and decisions and things that we can do that make it a lot easier to live peacefully and harmoniously with our surroundings, with other people. So being a human being, always keep your mind open to new ideas. Always be ready to take in new information, even if it's a challenge to do so. And doing this not only makes your life better, but it makes the lives of the people around you better too. So anyway, just keep this in mind. And if these concepts are really big or scary or kind of hard to understand, it's okay. It won't be like that forever. Peace and love, and thank you for your time.
Hell yeah. Ended on such a somber, loving note, and I really appreciate that for him. But I guess think my only disagreement would be that there is an objective right and wrong, that the universe, God, or whatever, Zymo, whatever you want to call it, respects or acknowledges or gets entrained and on the same wavelength as unity. And that can go both ways, which is something we don't ever really hear frequently, that there can be shadow, bad, dark, evil unity, and there can be righteous, light, amazing unity. Like, unity consciousness is a double-edged sword, because ultimately this is what I framing it in the negative, and also the understanding of like natural law. Put the natural law thing on the screen probably as I'm talking about it, but that like there's no such thing as a moral PDF filing. Like that's no one I've ever who's ever tried to be a moral like relativist to me, or say that there's like no that their whatever morals is correct, or that whose ever morals are wrong or right, that like no one is ever like, yeah, you're wrong about that. So at the very, very, very least, there is a standard for evil, and that trying to invert the good into the bad, or that like it's not it, bro. It's not it. There is a good and there is a bad. There is a evil and there is a righteous, and I'm gonna act correct because I don't want to, one, deal with the consequences, but two, like, it's just the heroic thing to do, is to be righteous and not self-righteous, because then you're waffling back onto the other side of bad and evil because you're thinking you are above the law of natural rights, or natural law, but no one really is. You can't ever escape the karmatic rubber band. If you keep pulling it back and keep manipulating people, eventually it's going to snap back on you. But the people who are doing that at the highest levels, who are pulling the strings at the top of the pyramid, or that capstone that's separated from the pyramid, like those people, through mind control, get other human beings to do their evil bidding for them, and then like distill or like distillate or diffuse the karmic rubber band snapping back at them, because they got their slaves to do it for them, because they are just slaves, mind controlled slaves. Everyone in some way, shape, or form has a little bit of mind control be into them, because that's just the way culture is in general. But you have free will, you have the ability to edify yourself, to improve who you are as a human being forever and ever and ever until you're dead. And that if you would like to learn more about it, you can click the link in the description, talk to me, we could book a discovery call, go through the coaching program, or have a plant medicine ceremony, or whatever you feel like you need to do with me or not with me, or just in general. Check out Mark Passio's work, Larkin Rose, Jordan Maxwell. Check out Jordan Maxwell or Michael Tessarian, all of these alternative researchers who are attempting to distill what they've come to understand about truth and wisdom. And that's basically it. Hopefully this video, I don't know who's going to even make it this far into this video, but like, share, comment, subscribe to keep the algorithm satisfied. And if I don't catch you while I'm alive, I'll see you on the flip side after I die, people. All right. Avida sane. Porra.